On today's episode of Locked On Phoenix Suns, your 2022 Suns Media Day recap. Very intense, very revealing, lots to learn, starting with Deandre Ayton. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 5 seasons, and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. A big thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen, your go-to source of Suns info every single day. Welcome to the show. Welcome if you're new. Hit follow, hit subscribe. Do not miss a show. Spotify, Apple, Google, YouTube, we're everywhere. And the best way to keep us everywhere and to keep us free is just to go ahead and listen. So again, hit follow or subscribe. Make sure you do not miss a single show. You can also follow along on Twitter at Locked On PHX Suns to keep up there as well. Media Day was busy. I think everybody expected it would be. I previewed a little bit of the storylines that I expected to emerge. I got a lot of them right, some of them wrong, and I'll own up to that. But Robert Sarver, DeAndre Ayton, Jae Crowder, Kevin Durant, this was a crazy summer, crazy offseason for the Suns. And for most of these guys, it was the first time we've gotten to speak to them or hear from them since all of that craziness happened. But I want to start with DeAndre Ayton. I have it in my notes here. I think the best way to summarize what happened is Ayton vibe checked the media. Maybe my younger listeners are going to get that a little bit more. But Ayton served up a heaping dish of disdain, frustration. I don't know. But let's dig into it. So I have some quotes, specific quotes that he said. And you got to go watch the videos or listen if you missed it. But on the topic of returning to Phoenix, he said, "I was happy." Very long pause. It was all done. Very long pause, I guess. On how Game 7 ended, DeAndre Ayton said sometimes... like, how much does he think about it was a question that was getting asked a lot. He said, sometimes I rewatch the games and there's a lot. It was a lot going on. That was the outcome of it, and everything was just discombobulated a little bit. All right. He went on later about this upcoming season to say, quote, "Nothing has changed. We're a lot older to now where there's no baby steps. We know the task at hand, so there's not really much talk." Now, just hearing those quotes from me sounds a lot like the mood of everybody else. You know, we know the task at hand. We want to win a championship. That's that. That was basically what everybody said. But if you watch DeAndre Ayton, the videos, everything, you will see a player who, more than at any point in my entire time covering him, which has been his entire career, he was distant, somewhat cold, outwardly just frustrated. Like I don't know. I don't want to put it on him, and I'll tell you what I think is happening here in just a second. But that scene has to be painted. This was not your normal DeAndre Ayton. I mean, last year at press conferences after games, Ayton would stroll in, yell the name of Dwayne Rankin, the Republic beat reporter, and, show off whatever chain he might have been wearing. Or this was a fun season, right? 64 wins. It's easy to be upbeat. I get that. But he could not have been further from that person today. So why did that happen? Well, according to Mark Spears of Anscape/ESPN, who called this media day a funeral, which I definitely don't, I'm not going to go that far on it. But, he was there. He was asking a lot of questions. And apparently he was able to take Ayton to the side a little bit, that after Ayton's formal session at the podium, And Ayton told Spears that he was somber because of the Sarver news and how it was weighing on him. Okay? I don't know. Monty, for his part, focused a lot on adding wrinkles to the offense. He's talking Ayton up as a potential all-star, said that it's on him to help to open up the offense a little bit to help Ayton grow. Mikhail and other players talked up Ayton's intensity, his focus, his determination. So everybody seemed to have a little bit of a different answer, whether it was focus on getting better, whether it was intensity and, determination to just start the season, whether it was Sarver. I have a different take, and I'm not saying any of those people are lying. It's probably all of these things are true. Or those people are helping to cover for Ayton, or Ayton's making drawing attention to some of his responses more so than others. My take on all of it is he's sick of his own narrative. DeAndre Ayton is sick of his own narrative. And here's what I mean by that. We've all had, I'm assuming you've had, a friend or a family member who maybe they're sick, not dying, but something long-term, a bad life situation, maybe a spouse or a girlfriend or a boyfriend who doesn't mesh well with them, maybe a life, like a work situation, bad boss, awful job, underpaid, angry, overworked, all these things. You have those people where they become known for that, right? Like that's the friend who has has to take care of his aunt whose husband died, and she lives at their house, and you see that person, you're drawn to always be asking about them, right? But you can't just ask about it forever. You can't only ever discuss that because number one, there's not a lot of new information, and number two, it's a bummer, right? I think DeAndre Ayton is kind of what happens if that chatter goes on for too long. If it's that same conversation, that same bummer black hole of a topic about one person for too many years. And it's not just media or fans, it's teammates. Like Brian Windhorst, who was also at Media Day today. I went back and listened to a report that he had on his podcast recently where he was talking about how he used the word yelled at, that Ayton has been the guy who's been yelled at on this team for many years. I mean, probably mostly the past 2 years because the stakes and the goals were a lot higher the past 2 years, trying to make the finals, win the finals. But yelled at is a pretty extreme thing to deal with, right? And then you couple that with all the stuff I talked about all summer when I was making sense of what was going on with Ayton with this contract situation where, look, he was accused of criminal action at the University of Arizona. He moved all around to different high schools before that. Then he gets to the NBA. He's a very, very, very much criticized number one overall pick, hotly debated. Should he have gone number one? How good is he really? What's his ceiling? I will fess up, take ownership that I added to that chatter too, of course. I think about, the conference finals last year is when I really flipped and I was, I guess I started preaching the gospel of DA a little bit more at least. Then this summer, the Suns clearly didn't want to bring him back immediately. Otherwise, they would have. He doesn't get the extension in the fall, and then that drags into the summer, and they don't sign him. They don't sign him. They don't sign him. They obviously were exploring trade options with him, whether that was Kevin Durant or others. So he's sick of it. And I can get that, right? He's done everything that's ever been asked of him as an NBA player in terms of, he had his rookie year to produce. He produced. He had his seasons 2 and 3, really 2, 3, and 4 to get better, win, sacrifice, commit to defense, all the stuff. And he did all those things, right? And now he got paid and rewarded for it. And yet he arrives to, another training camp where he's being questioned, where his commitment, his talent, his development, his ability to get better, all these things are still in question. He knows in the back of his mind that his team might not want him. He has teammates who constantly are chewing him out, and he's sick of it. I don't know if something else happened on Monday morning, Sunday night, Saturday night. He has a family. He has a life. I'm not going to hold people to how they happen to be for 20 minutes in front of the media. It could be anything. But I think you don't act that way as a professional athlete unless you know the message it's sending. He's been around long enough. He gets he knew this was going to generate a response, right? And so I think it was purposeful to a degree. And I think it was sending the message of, I'm fed up. And I don't blame him. I don't blame him for being fed up. And he vibe checked the media. He vibe checked the fans. He's tired of it. I think this is going to be the Ayton we get as long as that tone continues to be there around him. And as long as trade rumors continue to circle. Now, does it get a little bit easier when the games are coming and you can focus on winning? Sure. But this is not, I don't think this was a one-off. I would not be surprised if Ayton continued to strike this tone. Maybe he explains himself a little bit more, but I think he's tired of it, and I think he's earned the right to be tired of it. Jae Crowder, he's been the topic of conversation for a while now, basically since the Kevin Durant sweepstakes wound to a close. Now, next up, I want to tell you why everybody saw this coming besides Jae Crowder. And I don't mean his holdout. I mean everything that led to his holdout. First, guys, today's show brought to you by BetOnline, the #1 source for college and pro football betting info all season long. The latest player developments, team matchups, news, in-depth articles and analysis, plus podcasts on every game you can think of. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for sports wagering info with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there, not just football. I'm recording this as Monday Night Football is ending. Week 4 lines are up on the pro side. I told you before, the Cardinals they were 1.5-point underdogs on the road in Carolina in a late game. When I last recorded, it has gone up to just +1. The Cardinals are 1-point underdogs now. I would not be surprised if that is a pick 'em, or maybe even if the Cardinals are favored. So what I'm telling you is, get those odds now, because the Cardinals win gets you more money if they're +1 than when they're -1 or -2 or whatever it's going to be. But I'm looking at every single week 4 game on the pro side, all the big games on the college side, everything that you need to get through the football season the right way. Head to betonline.net or use their mobile app to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. So Jae Crowder was obviously a topic of conversation. The team announced shortly before training camp, less than a day before training camp, that he would not be with the team for camp, that they will explore a trade together. And so Crowder was not there. Goes without saying. Weirdly enough, his second media day without being around, because his first media day, I don't know if he got COVID or if it was ever fully explained, but he was a little late getting to camp. So another weird one. Jae Crowder keeps us guessing, but I want to read a few of the quotes here. So first of all, nobody indicated any feeling at the end of last season that Jae Crowder had any issues, problems, bubbling to the surface, anything. Kellen Olson from Arizona Sports asked most every single player some version of that question, and all of them agreed that everybody was disappointed with how Game 7 ended, with how the Mavericks series ended, with not winning a championship, all of that. But nobody, I mean, I don't know how much they would say if they did, but it seemed fairly genuine based on the sort of context that they provided, that there was no reason to believe that Crowder specifically had any problems. And I told you guys throughout the week, this past week, when this all hit a high point, that like Crowder spoke to the media before Game 7, and he was casual. He told us he was going to get a pedicure. He was cool as could be. And so I tend to believe them, that there was no indication of this. But all the players, obviously, you're going to hear this, they understood what Jae was doing and that it was in his best interest. So not a surprise there. The specific quote here is from Cam Johnson, which I think is the interesting one, right? Because it's been confirmed the past couple of days that Crowder, most of his frustration derived from losing his starting spot to Cam Johnson. So it would be easy to imagine, hey, the guy who took the spot of the player who's now holding out, maybe he just declines to comment. Maybe he feels a little bit hurt by that or frustrated by that, and he just sits it out, But he didn't, and kudos to Cam for that, but I think his answer was pretty genuine too. Here's what he said, quote, "There's no bad blood between Jae and I. Jae has looked out for me the past couple of years. He's taught me a lot. He's shown me a lot." So if Cam doesn't have a problem, if nobody saw this coming necessarily in terms of knowing he was angry or frustrated, then what's going on? Well, again, Dwayne Rankin, John Gambadoro both have now reported that the Suns let Jae Crowder know that Cam Johnson was going to be starting this season. There's other rumors out there that the Suns also told Jae he wouldn't be closing games. I'm not sure if that's fully true. Other rumors out there that Crowder wanted an extension potentially and didn't get one from the Suns. I think Shams Charania hinted at that a little bit. Here's the deal. So what's next? Shams also reported Miami, Boston, Dallas, and Memphis would be interested. I went through a lot of these multiple times throughout the past week or so. Keep an eye with that list, though, on players like Duncan Robinson from Miami, Derek White from Boston, Dylan Brooks from Memphis. I don't think Dallas has not much enough to get it done, even if Crowder did. He's played for all four of those teams, which is interesting, but he obviously started his career in Dallas. Here's the thing. All the other Suns players seem genuinely surprised that it ended up this way. But that's not because this outcome was shocking, all right? They were surprised, but I don't think they were shocked because they all knew what it was for Jae, right? Cam has been groomed to be a starter for years. He was basically a top 10 pick. He's next in line, obviously, and he's 6 years younger than Jae Crowder is. And Cam's not even a young man, so that's saying something, right? You don't get an extension if you're Crowder when you sign for the mid-level and you're coming off your worst season with the team. I mean, he's only had two, but he took a step back last year in terms of his three-point shooting, most notably, and I would say some of the bad shot selection. He's forcing shots because other guys weren't shooting. Like it devolved. Last year was very much a worse season for Crowder than the previous one. And so I think the reason that it caught everybody off guard and the reason you were hearing such kind of genuine surprise when Kellen and others were asking these Suns players about this situation is not because they were, clocked in the head with this big revelation about what was coming. It's because Jae should have seen it coming. Next up, I want to talk to you guys about probably my biggest takeaway, although it's not quite as juicy. But flushing Game 7 is not going to be possible for these Suns, no matter how hard they try. I want to dig into that next. First, I'm super excited to tell you guys about our next sponsor, My Solar Nerd. If you live in a sunny state like ours, it's very likely that you've had a few people stop by over the years offering you what they call, quote, free solar. But the truth is that many of these companies aren't local. And because of that, they're using misleading tactics and they end up overcharging homeowners. So if you've considered solar, but something felt off, then you're going to love My Solar Nerd. Their mission is simple: to help get you the best solar system to fit your needs. The guys at mysolarnerd.com are local and they understand the nuances of going solar in Arizona. They've been doing this for a while here locally, and so they understand that an educated customer is a happy customer, and their no-pressure approach will make sure all your questions get answered. Once you're ready, they'll put their industry knowledge to work for you by choosing the best equipment, warranties, and the Better Business Bureau accredited installer that they work with. They'll also help you figure out all the credits and incentives you may qualify for and make sure that your transition to solar is as smooth as possible by managing the entire project for you and keeping you updated along the way. Our Locked On Suns listeners will get a $50 Amazon gift card when they book a no-commitment evaluation. That's it. Just an evaluation, and you get an Amazon gift card in your pocket. This promotion, again, only for our listeners and only for those who are homeowners. So not apartments, of course. You don't get to put solar panels on your apartment. But if that applies to you, visit mysolarnerd.com and select Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Make the switch to solar on your terms. Start your research process now by visiting mysolarnerd.com today and show Locked On some love by letting them know we sent you. Folks, going solar doesn't need to be complicated, and mysolarnerd.com makes it easy. A few more quotes for you guys. And again, this is a media day where everybody it was dark, it was deep, it was cold. But at the same time, like Mark Spears and other people are painting this as he called it a funeral. Okay. My 2 cents on this whole part of it is this team should be down in the dumps. I mean, it's not their fault, all of it. You know, they lost game 7. That was always going to take, and we're going to get to that in this segment. That was always going to take a lot out of them. It was always going to be hard to overcome. I think it's going to require just getting back into the swing of another season, getting that bunker mentality and moving forward. But that was always going to be a hurdle to climb, right? A lot of these guys who were not in the Kevin Durant conversations, they probably thought they were coming back to a team with KD on it for at least some portion of this summer, right? Like, we all thought Kevin Durant might come here, especially the day that free agency started, when he's telling his team, I want to be traded to the Phoenix Suns. If you're Devin Booker, if you're, Chris Paul, obviously, some of these other guys, you're probably thinking, hey, if I make it through and I'm not in that trade, I get to play with Kevin Durant, we're going to be even better. And that didn't happen. And then Robert Sarver is credibly, it's confirmed that he said despicable, ugly things to people in the same business that these guys work in. And then their teammate, their again, that bunker mentality, a guy who's been in battles with them, decides to leave of his own choosing for no real reason and wants to leave the team. So of course they're upset. And I think it's healthy and normal for them to be that. But I think the one part of this that I don't fully think even these players who were admittedly very down today are confronting is game 7. So here's a few select quotes. One from Cam Johnson about how often he thinks about game 7. He said, all the time, every day, and in a way I kind of want to. They came into our house, punched us in the face, and knocked us out. Yeah, that sums it up. Cam was one of the people who did confront it head on, but I'm going to get back to all of this in a second as we get through these quotes. Monty, on his takeaways, lessons from game 7, quote, I think one of the things that I did not do a good job of last year was allow for other guys to grow in their ability to initiate offense, which takes a lot of pressure off Chris, which allows him to be fresher. Chris Paul, on speaking of him, here's his quote. I haven't thought about it too much. At some point, I'll probably go back and watch it, or maybe not. James Jones. This one was probably the most interesting, and I think the one that I responded to the most, and that really formed my skepticism about how they're handling this. James Jones said, quote, how you lose, unless you're really fragile, it really stokes a fire and it helps you build better offseason habits so you can come back and not replicate that outcome. So basically that's him saying the fact that we got blown out doesn't really make a difference. The point is we lost, and that should make us hungry for more. I also want to add Monty took ownership of the players not being ready to play, in addition to not growing their games and their offensive creation ability. So here's what I hear when I was listening to them this morning, when I was at Media Day, but also the ones I just read back to you now. They're trying to flush it down the toilet and move on, right? They're trying to dispose of the game, not act like it never happened, but move past it and not dwell on it. Not overreact to one singular game. And then, talk up and take comfort in the culture and the talent that's very obviously here. You can't deny that. But here's what they're overlooking. So, that's what they said. I think this is what they're trying to do. But I think they're overlooking a few things, namely that this wasn't just any loss, okay? I don't think it just goes away. Even if they internally can use it as motivation, can use it as a way to prompt some changes with how they operate, that's all good. That's all necessary. But where it won't go away is opposing fans, online chatter, which I promise you these guys hear and they see. I can guarantee you Deandre Ayton would not be nearly as upset as he seemed, if not for what gets said on TV and on the internet about him. And media questions. People are going to ask these Suns about it. Away, like road media who comes into Phoenix, or when the Suns are on the road, and these national reporters who just swoop in. It's not going to go away for months, if it ever goes away. And then by the next time in 2023, when the playoffs come around again, how do you guys not, collapse? How do you avoid falling apart? Blah, blah, blah. This is going to be there. And they probably know the other part of this, so it won't go away is one thing. The other thing is they probably know deep down they had an amazing, right there for the taking chance at a championship in 2021. And then they followed that up by throwing away potentially an even better chance in terms of their own talent and cohesion. Another better chance in 2022. And if you follow that, they also, these players, the coaches, everybody probably understands and it doesn't sit right with them that a lot of the offseason moves that we saw were or near moves, a lot of the offseason, the opportunities that they explored were a chain reaction from that loss, right? Pursuing Kevin Durant, exploring trades for Ayton, now to Jae Crowder deciding to part ways. These are all things that if they, make it to the finals again, win the finals, these are not things that they probably do, because I think that they would have had a puncher's chance against Golden State. I think they could have had a pathway to beating Boston. Like, this was a championship team, even with how ugly some of that Dallas series looked. And so they don't do a Kevin Durant trade if they're coming off of a title. They don't trade DeAndre Ayton if they're coming off of a title. Jae Crowder, probably, even if he does lose his starting spot, it would be pretty crazy to imagine you leaving your team that you just won a championship with to demand a trade if you win that title, if you move and achieve the goals that you have. So it's hard to get over that, right? It's hard to get over this gut-wrenching, awful thing that happened that everybody's still talking about, that was your maybe best chance as a group to win and get the job done, and then that set off all of these stressful, chaotic few months that you just are getting away from now by getting back into the next season. So the Suns are, it's not as easy as flushing it. It's not as easy as, doubling down on your culture and your talent, which is what James Jones basically emphasized himself. This is going to take a lot to move on from. It's going to take stringing together wins. It's going to take, chemistry getting rebuilt. It's going to take different players sacrificing and adjusting and just being honest with themselves. This team is going to have to deal with that loss head on, because it's already been, almost 5 months, and it's still here, which means it's going to linger much longer than that going forward. More to come this week. I'm sure there will be aftermath of Media Day. We have training camp, which means more media availabilities throughout the week as these guys get on the practice court. So keep it right here. Hit follow, hit subscribe. Do not miss a show. And in the meantime, make Locked On NBA your second listen here on this Tuesday to catch up on everything else going on around the NBA.